Oh, leave the billion-dollar company alone. Uh, what if I did the entire show like this? I just took down all my notes and I said it exactly like this. Got a very special set of tools. Autism. Hope everybody's doing good. Take two. Already recorded an entire episode of today's notes, but let's see if we can do it better. If I could do it better, if I could do it the best. Start smoking cigars, get my voice all phlegmy. Okay, so I accidentally said Nancy Fagan instead of Mary Fagan. Mary Fagan. Mary Fagan. Mary Fagan was the person who was murdered by Leo Frank, who the Anti-Defamation League was created to defend. This sick cultist who murdered her on Passover Eve, specifically because a lot of these Talmudist Frank, like even the Talmud is thrown out by a lot of these cultists. And one can assume that Leo Frank probably had some sort of like a direct lineage from the people who started the Frankist cult, because it's like similar naming structure. But yeah, it is a terrible, terrible thing to see. And it is still very much actively going on. And it's still very much something that needs to be fought tooth and nail. I'm gonna fight it tooth and nail. Oh, and the chemist's name that I was looking for is Hamilton Morris. Hamilton Morris was the guy who has massive chemistry knowledge, has a podcast, and used to be on Vice, and has lent a lot of his knowledge to the world. He's lent a right bit of knowledge to the world. At the end of the day, conspiracy theory in the local colloquialism is meant entirely to dismiss. And just like the term PSYOP, you gotta be careful, you gotta study where the term gets used most often and avoid colloquialisms that might muddy the waters of your argument before it's even made. Make your argument, show your work, put your logic forward, and then respect people enough to say no if they don't want to take part in it. Don't get super upset, because that will ensure that the people who say no at that moment will be driven away to a permanent end. You don't want that. You want to be able to reason and rationalize with people. Straight up, mate. It's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling to think that astronomy is a real religion these days. Thanks, Nancy Reagan. Thanks, Israel. Ancient people thought the night sky was part of or just outside of the firmament. They thought stars and constellations were manifestations of supernatural forces. And though that is partially true, they are entirely natural. The Chinese just honor tradition with their zodiac. And the zodiac was something that I missed on my religion lists, going from the beginning to the end, and the history, and what they're comprised of, and where they normally stay. And the zodiac was very important for the East and the Middle East, like from the Persia to the actually everywhere in the Middle East, essentially, from Egypt to ancient Israel, Syria, Babylon, Persia, India, and China, all the way over. That the zodiac is very important for them. And it's also sort of important for the Japanese, but the Japanese also have like a synthesis of animism with their yokai. And the zodiac was very important for understanding Zoroastrianism and for understanding a lot of Chinese pre-Confucian religions. And Zoroastrians very much helped in the formation of Christianity. And who knows to what extent they actually helped propagate it throughout the Middle East, because they were very much bending towards the infant Christ. And it's hard to tell, because the radical Zionists, radical Sunni Islamists, those people have worked very, very hard to tear down history. And it's kind of ironic that everywhere you go, you find Zionists who are teaming up and turning aberrant various religions from Christian Zionists to Wahhabist Islam, and they're allies with these forces that then destroy their own host religions, their own home base foundational religions. And also, like, on that topic, the alien worship symbol is a Star of David with a bunch of, well, Star of Metatron. It's not Star of David. Star of Metatron with a bunch of swirly, twisty stuff leading to the inside. That's the alien worship religion. And this new Mu Limorin Eloi crap is delusional psychosis, cooked up by special snowflakes, their touchstar posses, but originally directed by the same force I was just talking about. The great manipulators. And those Zionist propaganda is spammed everywhere. It's not as popular as it used to be, and it loses purchase every day. People are way smarter than they used to be. People are way less easy to manipulate than it used to be, thanks to the constant manipulation churning in the internet. I would assume some Zionists deliberately leaned into that so that they could try and demoralize people and break people down, make people easier to control. But what they ended up doing was causing a blowback where a lot of people did straight up drink bleach, but the people who didn't, they learned from watching the other monkey eat the poisonous butterfly, hey, maybe avoid eating that butterfly, right? So don't trust everything you see online. Don't trust everything you see about 5G or chemtrails or anything like that, while staying grounded, recognizing that intense radiation, even though you can't see it, is damaging, that they are like Vietnam tells everybody they can drop very deadly chemicals from planes very easily if they want to. Most of that does take place here in Florida out of helicopters. They're just dropping a tremendous amount of poison all over the place, genuinely, out of helicopters. It's one of the things that the Zionists have really loved doing, and one of the things that's earned them my great ire. And they are just poisoning everything, and I assume that the more lands that they take control of, the more poison that they'll drop, the more they'll turn God's beautiful green earth into a horrifically nasty desert. Tikam on my ass. But, did you know bar mitzvah parties are a huge customer for underage sex trafficking? Who would have guessed? Who could have thunk? Tisk tisk. Also, though, anybody who questions the malignancy of neo-Nazism needs to look into the Delphi ritual murders. It's when 2 young girls were murdered in a Deer Park area and up in Indiana, and the police, the jail, the various trusted people around the area are all avowed Odinists. And they basically tortured and imprisoned an innocent person, ruined his life, tortured him very severely. And all the while, no justice is served, and it's just a big travesty. And it's painted their little city into a horrific place, whereas a lot of the Odinists probably are fleeing with their tails between their legs, hiding, going off so they can do more horrific things in other places, while the city bears that smudge forever. And I hope they find every single one of those guards that had Odinist patches on them. And I would hang them. I would hang them if I was the one in charge. I would sentence them to execute, to be hung by the neck until dead. Execution. That's what I would say. That would be fair. It'd be more than fair. That'd be too fair, you know. Some people would say, firing squad from the ankles up. That's a little bit too extreme. I'm not like the Odinists. Just hang them. Don't lynch them like they would do. Don't cut them up with box cutters like they would do to children. Just hang them. I'm sorry about that nasty little snippet of reality, but that's something that's been being processed since 2017, and is very much part of the scope of a lot of America right now when it comes to the problems that we're dealing with internally. Some people, they say that history is cyclical, but I believe the truth couldn't be further from that. There are archetypes that remain fixed in place, like spokes on a pachinko board. And if an ant were to ride the pachinko board from the top down, and repeatedly, they might think over time something like a cyclical structure through the randomness would apply, but the basic truth of it all is, it is what it is. Many manipulators purport things from the past to be drastically different than they actually were. This is a common theme. And, more importantly, I firmly assert that beloved Jungian theory, that heaven and hell are locked in place, and that the consequences and rewards are always there. But the atoms and the energy embodied in the natural world are in a constant state of flux. And that's exactly why the flow state is important for art, because you're tapping into something very fundamental in order to push structures into this world that at times touch both the superego of the divine and the id of the basal mind. Art is a very fascinating thing. We just lost a lot of what art actually is in the last 100 or so years. And also, nothing is ever the same way twice. Lightning might be able to strike the same place multiple times, but it never arcs the same way. And thus, the only things worth learning are intuition and theology. At least from my perspectives. I mean, it helps to learn things like the metric system. If you can encapsulate in your brain, tie together the entire metric system, you're really cooking. A lot of people who are like violently angry with things like the metric system just because it's attached to the EU don't understand where it came from, don't understand how beautiful the entire system is, how genius, how like strikingly genius, and the greatness of European people in general is encapsulated in the metric system, how it ties light and sound and frequency and radiation and speed and measurements all together in a contiguous thing. I cannot put it all together in my head, but if you can put it all together in your head, if you have a brain for that, you're probably cooking. You're probably cooking. That doesn't mean you're going to use it every day, though. Most things are like fractions, stuff like that. Fractions are probably more important than the metric system when it comes to understanding like pragmatic action. Anyways, Jordan Peterson was once an honest, reasonable maverick in a mostly malignant college intellectual, Freudian, Rousseauian, psychological milieu. But he got all screwed up, and he devolved into a Zionist and became increasingly violently psychotic. Whereas he used to pride himself in pulling people up, and that's where real strength is gained. Pulling people up. Being the monk that holds the wood on which people cross the dangerous stream while you sit in it with courage and bravery. That's where real strength comes from. And that he has none of that these days. He's one of the weakest people. One of the weakest people. And that just goes to show what Zionism rewards you with. Like, okay, enjoy your fancy postmodern suits. You know, your stuff that clashes horrifically and has no real artistic intent. But you are so emotionally, psychologically, spiritually weak. And I pray for your soul. Oh, gosh, poor Jordan. It's a nightmare what happened to that man, but hopefully he can suffer in a sort of way like we watch the monkey eat the poisonous butterfly. We go, avoid cooking that into a stew. Intellectuals are a crapshoot. So are drugs. Jordan Peterson got hooked on a ton of Xanax before he went into a coma, got trepanated, miraculously woke up out of it. But, you know, it takes a lot of intelligence to make drugs work in a viable way, with a viable life. Mostly what drugs really exist for, I believe this truly, they're not meant to replace your natural functioning processes in your brain. In fact, Buddhists are screaming at the American psychiatric system because you can do all of that on your own. You don't need something to come and blast your receptors and your producers in your brain so that you no longer produce any of the things that your receptors receive and need, and then you go off of the chemicals. You go absolutely, completely and utterly insane, way more insane than you'd ever be normally. You can just do it on your own through hard work, meditation, your brain releasing what it needs when it needs it, and trying to avoid a lot of the stuff that people are forced into in American society is a big thing. That's actually where a lot of it comes from. But back to intellectuals. Intellectuals, man. Take socialist thinkers, right? Chris Hedges is visibly psychotic. All the muscles in your face that you use to tell people you're alive and to communicate the sincerity of your message are just dead. Every time he talks, he just talks like this all the time. That's it. That's the only look he ever has. And take Richard Wolff, who talks to everyone like they're in special ed. I'm not sure if Mans has a higher than 80 IQ. Socialism is good. Capitalism is bad. Can you show your work? No! You're a college professor! You're a college professor speaking to people on a 7th grade level. What a tragedy for higher learning. I like R.J. Esco, though. He's not really an intellectual. He's not really a college professor, but he is a socialist thinker. And R.J. Esco, many times, he's Jewish, but many times he has good ideals. He was just never super successful, so you never really know what he's capable of. Sad to say, but you get more and more suspicious the more you see more traitors popping up out of specific cultures. And what is Marx? Marx was an atheistic Yiddish man who had sex with his parents' maid, never worked because he thought it would be robbery of his goodwill, and what he ended up doing, becoming psychotic, fat, stupid, and he created a hyper-assumptive warp of history in order to say that basically, in a Darwinian sense, all of life is in constant conflict, and that cooperation is a far cry from reality, that is a sickness to think that is in yourself a rheumatism of the spirit, of the conceptualization, and you're just completely ignoring and pasting over things like Christianity when you do that. You're completely ignoring and pasting over the love that a mother animal has for her children. Why wouldn't she just abandon them? Why would she fight to the death to save them? Why would both male and female parent, provide food for their children as they grow? Why? Because there's cooperation that involves love. And when a leader has love for his people or her people, then you see that society thrive. And that's completely pasted over by Marx and his psychotic assumptions of history and reality. There's a lot of hand-wavy boomer blaming at the moment. But what it all boils down to is that the average American citizen, year over year, has less, gains less, and generally has less to look forward to. They have been priced out of traditional symbols of upwards mobility, like housing, and find themselves competing for jobs with the entire world, which the third world being imported in mass into the United States so that powerful people have an unquestioning horde of slaves that they can pay literal poverty wages and control via the threat of green card revocation at the expense of the native population. You notice how people start talking about bird flu? Crazy how that happens. I'm gonna go kiss a crow. But it's wild how COVID just ceased to exist when the George Floyd protests needed to happen. I'm not saying that people shouldn't be critical of police and that police critical protests shouldn't be like all over the place since 9/11. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that the people who are the most violently, antisocially, aggressively, hateful and terror-fueled when it came to COVID-19 pandemic ended up being the same ones. Although after listening to Trump, going out into the streets and intermingling and, allowing for both sides to lose, essentially, so that we could have just a little bit of a virtue signal party, which a lot of people, when the George Floyd protest popped off, they were already locked down for 2 or 3 months. And a lot of the people that were not happy with locking down and just needed to go out and socialize and party and drink and do drugs and have sex were already like in a very bad way. And they were healing. Nature was healing. But, a lot of people stayed with the internet, a lot of people stayed psychotic. And that's the problem. And, people have completely stopped talking about bird flu. after the stock market fell. That's super funny in my opinion. I think that is hilarious. I know I really hate rice rocket groups more than anything else. It's the quickest way of telling everybody you've been in a clique full of subhuman child abuse victims since middle school, and they haven't, and you haven't grown since. I got no pity, I got no mercy for anybody who speeds. One of the most pathetic things Null ever said was the fact that he hates police because he got a speeding ticket once. That's pathetic. That's exactly how Elon Musk has any support, is those sorts of low vibration thinking, low aura thinking, low tier operating. You should love yourself now. The Pavlovian effect people get from gasoline astounds me. Those hydrocarbons will mess you up, buddy. But thinking about Kiwi Farms, I'm thinking about doing a tier list of users that I can say some stuff about. I'm already lurking, and I'm assigning grades to the people that I know about, and I have commentary in my head for a lot of these people. And what I can do is that I can download all their avatars, and I can go on one of those websites that allows you to make a tier list, and I can screen grab that while narrating it, and I can make my own very special Kiwi Farms tier list. That'll probably make like 3 digits. I'm not really all that concerned about numbers. I saw somebody was making fun of me. I think it was Rolling Rock. Rolling Rock! Rolling Rock! Making fun of me because I didn't have any views in an hour. Bruddy, I probably had a couple of views. It just doesn't show up in the first hour. But no, it's like, yeah, I know I get like a dozen views every video. It's not for that. Over time, even if somebody watches one of my videos, I hope to make the condensed thoughts enough to actually inspire people to start thinking about things in a slightly different way. You know, that's the whole point. And I know it's a little bit pedantic and a little bit almost insulting to think that, like, I'm some sort of an intellectual or anything. Like, I don't know what my IQ nowadays is. I know what I got it tested at when I was, like, way back when in school. Before I tried to kill myself on Benadryl. God knows what my IQ is these days. I mix up things in this. When I go off of memory, I very easily mix stuff up in my head. I try not to, but, you know, I give myself an 85, 86. I get a solid B, you know, and I try to make myself better. But I also recognize that, hey, nobody's perfect, and try your best, and that's all you can do. Speaking of all you can do, Patrick Bet David is necessary to help bridge US-Iranian relations, and I do believe he's at least somewhat of a refutation of the gaudy and base Persian stereotype. But his new book is so dumb. The Academy, oh gosh. It's a lot like Ben Shapiro's book in that it's so dumb that it actually wraps around to being smart and funny. Anyways, let's wrap it up. Let's talk about Lula da Silva down in Brazil. He is investing big time in Novo Nordisk on in-country insulin production. And God bless that man, because if his country does that right and they make sure that it doesn't go out to scalpers and they actually end up accurately distributing the insulin to type 1 diabetes and then type 2 diabetes afterwards, he'll save a lot of people that otherwise would just straight up die from lack of pancreatic cells functioning properly in their body from whatever accident happened along the line. Because of course people need a pancreas. People need pancreas. It's not a genetic thing. When you talk about random mutations, a lot of times you're talking about like intense chemical poisoning that causes mutagenic effects. And a lot of the times it's because the intense mutagenic exposure unraveled the ends of people's DNA strands, destroying and shrinking and then destroying their telomeres. And then their chromosomes, their kids' chromosomes got all messed up. The kids' DNA was severely warped. Very rarely does that end up turning out okay. And a lot of people need to be taken care of, you know? My life matters as much as you. And yeah, Downey, your life does matter. I love you. All right. Hope everyone has a good one. Cheers.